All right, why don't we start? Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight or today or whenever you're watching this. This is Glimmers from the Data Sphere. This is the Monte Games team going live to talk about varied topics about our games, about storytelling, and all things related to things we love, I think, right? So tonight we have Charles Ryan and Shanna Germain, and we're talking about telling stories. And we have Gozer, right? Hello. A variety of animal companions are probably showing up tonight, so get ready.
Indeed.
Yeah, tonight we're talking about storytelling, both from the game side, sort of interactive and collaborative storytelling, and from the writing novels, the sort of solo or few people act of actually writing stories down, and sort of the intersections of the two. I think we've all been really, really impressed with what people have been doing with writing and creating various forms of art with Elamir. So thank you. Yeah, and why don't, if we want to introduce ourselves just for people who might be tuning in and may not know us all yet. Hopefully we're getting new people.
Okay, who should start? Shanna, you start.
I'm Shanna Germain. I never know what to say about myself in these situations. I write stuff and I tell lies for a living, and I love being part of MCG. That's my whole spiel.
Perfect.
Well, in addition, Shanna is our managing editor and one of our designers and one of the founders of the company and one of the, co-creators, or at least was there from the very beginning, ground up for Numenera as well. Yep. But I'm Charles Ryan. I'm the COO of MCG. Mostly at MCG, I'm on the business side of things, but I do write a little bit on the side as well. I used to do a lot of design work in the RPG realm. I used to be on the creative side of it. Yeah.
That's fabulous. Yeah, and you have the Gods of the Fall power steel name, as you are now Tammy Ryan tonight.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess somehow, for some reason, it logged me in as Tammy, but I don't know why or how. So I'm standing in for Tammy.
Yes, I do.
Excellent. Ooh. Nice.
Oh, look at that. That's a big catch there.
It is an Invisible Sun inspiration collection, really.
Ooh, that's juicy. Excellent. Well, we already received a bunch of great questions from you guys, so why don't we dive into a few to start. There was a lovely warm-up question. I like opening these with kind of off-the-wall ones. What, when you wake up in the morning, are you most grateful for? So that's from Roy. Shanna, do you want to hit us with what you wake up in the morning grateful for?
Well, let's see. Do I have to pick a single thing? No, I don't. It's my rule. I am grateful to do what I love for a living, and the first thing I usually do in the morning is walk the dog and have coffee. I'm grateful for both of those things as well. But mostly it's passion. I think doing what I love for a living has been a dream of mine since I was 5 or 6, and so the fact that I get to do it it's just, I don't know, I feel very lucky.
Fabulous.
And I have 2 kids in middle school, so we get up at 6:30 in the morning to get them off to school. So it's very hard for me to be grateful for anything first thing in the morning, except perhaps coffee, which Sean has already called out. But if I were to answer that less flippantly, I'd probably say almost the exact same thing. Working in the game business, which is most of what I've done for most of my professional career, is fantastic. Working at a company that we can shape and make it be what we want to be with our, our priorities, our values, our, making exactly the types of products we most love. I'm very grateful for that.
Ah, that's great. Excellent. Why don't we, since we're going to be talking about, so we know we're so happy to be here at Monte Games. That's just a truth and a foundational truth of our lives, I think. But why don't we dip briefly into your histories to tell the audience about games that you've been involved with, or games you've really liked to play or have done design work on, and then any recent kind of novels that you've written, so that people kind of know where you're coming from as you give advice. So why don't we start with Shanna again? We're starting with Laura. We can switch off.
Okay, so I the same favorite aunt who gave me The Hobbit in like 5th grade for Christmas, and the Lord of the Rings for like 6th grade for Christmas. And these are in the 70s. And 1979 gave me the blue box D&D basic set for Christmas. And that's what got me into RPGs and gaming more generally. Then I, as many people did back then, tried my best to fix my own game by essentially fix my own campaigns by essentially writing my own rules that worked. And that kind of ultimately led me to publishing my own games back at the very, very dawn of desktop publishing, when it was actually became practical for a human being who wasn't a publishing company to like try and make a thing in the print medium. And I've been doing that. Chameleon Eclectic was the company that I founded and ran for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. I worked at Pinnacle, Last Unicorn Games. Last Unicorn was bought by WotC, so I ended up there. As I said earlier, I was on the R&D side, writing and editing and developing. And then I went over to the business side, and I was the brand manager for D&D. And then I actually took a gig working for Asdevium, which is one of the world's largest distributors in the UK. So I worked in distribution for a while. So other than a little hiatus between that and Monte Cook Games, I've been in games my entire professional career, or just about. Yeah.
And then fiction.
And as on the fiction side, my first published piece was a short piece for the dime novel Infestations for Deadlands, and it got an Origins Award, which I was very, very proud of, even though it was a pretty small piece. And then I went long time without doing anything, and then I did a novel called The Mason of New Orleans, which is an historical novel, but has a touch of supernatural in it, and is based. Came out of a long-running campaign that I ran, which is, I think, what got me invited to this discussion 4 or 5 years ago.
That's excellent. Thank you. All right, Shanna, catch us up.
Oh my gosh, it's hard to go after that. I feel like my thing is so very tiny.
Well, but when I have longevity in the game industry, you have it as a fiction writer 100 times more than me.
I've been a gamer for a really long time. You guys have probably heard the stories that Bunnies and Burrows was my beginning. I played D&D in high school, and then just sort of for a long time became a computer-only gamer. I played a lot of WoW and a lot of EQ2, mostly because I didn't have a gaming group, and so that allowed me to have a gaming group through the internet. That whole time I've been a writer. I started as a poet and moved into literary fiction for a little while, then erotica, then sci-fi, then fantasy, then horror, and then gaming. So I've done a little bit of everything, and mostly, as long as it involves words, I really, really love it.
That's fabulous. And you're...
So you need to write some detective fiction, so then you can have every genre fiction covered.
I don't, noir fascinates me, but I don't understand it as a writer. Like, I don't think I do a very good job. I was supposed to talk about what I wrote recently, which was Poison Eater, which came out earlier this year. And then Monte and I just finished co-writing The Nightclave, which was my first experience as a co-writer, and that was super interesting. And I hope to do it again soon, because there's so much I loved about it.
Oh, that's awesome. So I think we could talk about, one of the really good questions that got a couple upvotes was by Mark, and it was asking about what kinds of methods or tools the both of you use to help you organize ideas and world building. And I think this might be agnostic of game versus fiction, but it might be different. So tell us about your techniques.
Do I go first this time?
I think it's Shanna's turn, yeah.
Either way.
So for me, I have some tools that I use that really capitalize on my techniques. One is Scrivener. I use that for writing novels. I use that for running games. I keep that for keeping track of like our Invisible Sun game that we're in right now. Because you can cut and paste art and you can organize it in cool ways. And I just find it really easy to search and find. I'm also a big fan of bullet journals. This is my current bullet journal. It's all organized by topics, and I have a couple of books I'm working on, and it's got notes from our Monte Cook Games meetings, and it has GMing notes, and I just sort of love that because it allows me to keep everything in. My whiteboard is for ideas that have not germinated yet. So that's I am often in meetings going, oh, I want to remember that. So those are sort of my big tools, other than things like Freedom, which is basically just kicks me off the internet so that I can focus and get work done. Charles, what about you?
So I mostly I do the preliminary stuff in my head. I'm not very good at scribbling things down any place, because I don't keep, as organized as I am generally speaking in life, like I don't do that well. But my head does a pretty good job. When it comes down to then turning that into something, the processes are very, very different. I also use Scrivener for writing, but I don't use it for outlining. For outlining, I actually use a spreadsheet because I typically try to have multiple sort of plot lines or things that are going on in the arcs of different characters, and I can create. I actually stole this. I stole it from J.K. Rowling. What I really stole it from was like somebody tweeted a picture at some point of like a sketch of J.K. Rowling's plot notes for one of the Harry Potter novels, and I have no idea if it's legit. I don't know if somebody just made that up or if it was real, but I liked it, right? And so I actually use an Excel spreadsheet, and here's like chapter by chapter, this way, and this way it's each different character or each different plot line or whatever, and that way it really helps me sort of fit things together and make all the plot lines intertwine in a really nice and satisfying way. But like running a game is completely different. For a game, I will sit down and I'll open a document, and at the top I'll bullet out like the main things that have to happen, and then I'll start writing out my notes for individual encounters, and I'll get 5 or 6 of those done, noted out, and that's usually more than like what would happen in one evening's play. And then after that play occurs, then I go back and I sort of reconcile what actually happened with what sort of my notes were and what I still need to have happen, and then I write a few more scenes, or not writing a scene is the wrong word because that's not what you're doing for an RPG, but bullet out the key points of what I anticipate happening in a few more scenes and encounters, and I usually keep it's just basically this long running document, and I'm sure it makes no sense to read after the fact, but I just keep it sort of lives and evolves as the game goes on. And so it's a totally different outlining process.
I remember seeing your spreadsheet for fiction once, Charles. You sent it to me as I was trying to figure out my own thing. And like, it was both amazing and it broke my brain at the same time because it's totally not how I think. And so I was like, I just want someone else to do this part for me because it looked so helpful, but I couldn't wrap my mind around it. That's what I love about writing. Everyone's just so different.
Yeah, but the truth is that those two processes aren't completely different, because then like as I write a chapter, right, like maybe that thing that I had put into this character's arc didn't really fit in, so I didn't do it, and so I'll cut and paste that down into the next cell or 2 or 3 chapters down, wherever it fits. So like what that looks like at the beginning is sort of like my role-playing game thing, where it's like detailed at the top, and then it gets much fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier, right? And then things move as the writing progresses. So
Shanna, yeah, how was that different? How is your process different when co-writing? Was there anything specific technologically you used there? Or
co-writing with Monte is so perfect for me because like he understands plot in a way that I just don't. Like plot is my Achilles heel. I struggle with it so much. Like I can write world building and characters, and I can break your heart like to the end of time, but I can't figure out a plot to save my life. And so like Monte going, here's the plot that I have an idea for, and then I could come in and start filling in like little bits and creating characters, and then he would pick it back up and run with it and make something really cool and interesting happen. And it was so, it was, on one hand, it was harder because we were trying to sort of meld our ideas and our language and all this other stuff. And on the other hand, it was so much easier because I felt like we each have different strengths and flaws. And so that was actually really nice. I really like that. Plus, it's just cool to sit around and brainstorm a story and be like, and then you can do this really cool, weird thing. And we build on each other's weirdness, which I don't know, I find that really fun.
Ooh, yeah, and Charles, I guess talking about kind of plot versus maybe details about characters or themes and things, do you find you do different things to organize or keep track of those details compared to just the plot? Just the plot. The plot is a lot and to organize itself, but yeah, what do you do?
So I, like Shanna, I use Scrivener when I'm writing fiction. I have tried to use it for stuff related to game design, and I think I did use Scrivener for the one adventure I wrote for the Strange Revelations, the instant adventure. And Scrivener has all these tools, as Shanna was describing, where you can put in, bits and pieces that you find on the internet, links, images, stuff like that. And I don't use that to its full extent. I don't know. I tend to find that most of my organization of like themes and characters, stuff like that, happens in my head when I'm lying in bed about to fall asleep, or on driving someplace on a road trip or whatever like that. And that's super important for me to be able to get my writing together. What I really need organizational tools is for remembering all the names of the people. This character that appeared in chapter 2, a small speaking part, but is going to reappear, and some key details about that. And Scrivener, as a tool helps me do that really well.
There was another question too about outlining and planning, and it was about I think it might have been from Josh or Joshua, asking about how in depth you go with any of this outlining, right? Like, do you have any guidelines for people about what might be? I'm sure everyone finds their balance, but do you have any advice about how much to plan? Let's say for gaming first and then fiction, versus keeping room open to improvise or adjust. And I guess it speaks to both forms, but. Yeah.
I think Charles and I are going to have really different answers on this. Go, Charles.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Let's see.
You go first.
You go first.
Okay. So in my experience, there are sort of two kinds of writers. One is a plotter and one's a pantser, by which I mean to say you do everything by the seat of your pants. And I both GM and write totally by the seat of my pants. Like it's the equivalent, this is not my analogy, it's someone else's, of like driving in the dark with your headlights on. I can only see as far as my headlights go. I don't have a map. I don't know what's out there. It could be anything. And I think as a GM, that creates a lot of opportunity to have anything happen. As a writer, it actually just creates a lot of time that you spend rewriting because you don't know where the heck you're going. So I don't actually recommend it. And I find that the more I write, the more I am learning how to plot, but I'm just not a big plotter kind of in anything, not in my life, not in not in anything I do, I think.
Well, my answer is not really that different from yours. And I really like your headlights example, because it's sort of like what I was saying before about when I do that spreadsheet, it's really detailed at the top and then it gets fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier. I do, and again, in life as well as in writing, I do like to have a map, right? And I had this idea of like, well, I'm going to end up over there and I'm probably going to take this road and then go left. And I think, but we'll see what happens, right? And so I have like this rough map, but the like you say, it's like what you see is right in front of you. That's the stuff where you can put out the details. And I know there are some writers who sit down and write detailed outlines. And I know there's some publishers that require that. And that's totally not me, right? Like I can write, like if I wrote an outline in the standard form for a novel that I was writing or something like that, every chapter will get the section will get shorter and shorter and shorter until the very end it'll be like, and then there's a climax and it's all over. Right?
I can remember one of my novels for HarperCollins, they actually needed like a 5-page sort of write-up of what was going to happen. They approved it. The novel was totally different. And when they sent it in, my editor was actually like, this is not your outline at all, but it's a good novel. So last time they asked me to write an outline.
I mean, I think that they would kind of have to expect that almost, right? Like I'm sure there are some writers that write that way. In fact, I know some writers who write that way, but I'm sure there are plenty of others who don't.
Yeah, I just like to leave myself open to the things that happen in my life or that inspire me along the way. And to be able to sort of take a really hard left turn, if you will, as something shows up and seems cool.
Ooh, I have a question related to Invisible Sun, and kind of thinking about planning for game sessions too, right? So Invisible Sun is going to, the way it plays is really it's less the GM placing interesting arcs in front of the characters and more the characters internally deciding things they want to explore about their own life or their own self and bringing that to the GM and the table. So could you, I guess generally when you game, how do you think about what kinds of interesting plot to lay before your characters? Do you tend, like when you plan a session, do you think, well, there are these interesting things that are going to happen and we'll see how the players will react? Or are you thinking about, well, I know I can tug on this heartstring, I'm going to really go for this heartstring. Like, what do you guys do with respect to that? Charles, you want to go first? It's your turn.
Okay, but my answer is going to be really short because I haven't run Invisible Sun yet, and my play with it is fairly limited as well. But you've hit the nail on the head. It is totally driven by the arcs that the characters have built into them, and it's much more about the GM than framing around that, as opposed to the GM saying, I bought this adventure path. That's what we're going to play. I'm going to send you to this location. But I haven't run it, so I can't really talk about building out those adventures yet. So Shanna has a bit more experience with Invisible Sun.
Yeah, I would say that in our game, we tend to use Slack a lot between games. And so we're talking about, like, last week or a couple weeks ago, one of the characters was having a funeral for her dreams. It's kind of convoluted. And so on Flat, we were talking about the fact that she was going to have this funeral, and we were all going to go, and what we were going to bring as sort of a sorrow gift. And so we had all these parts that we were working on behind the scenes. And I think that actually really gives the GM a lot of insight into the kind of things that matter to us. And so it allows Monte to sort of poke us in the heart on a regular basis. And so I think, Invisible Sun is the most narrative-driven game I've ever played as a player, and I haven't run it yet either. And I think it's going to really change. You're going to have to run it in a totally different way because you are reactive in many ways to the player's needs and wants, the character's needs and wants. Rather than proactive. And so it's this really wonderful balance, I think. As far as on the GM side for other things, it really depends. Like, do I have a group that I've had for a while and I know what excites them and breaks their heart? Or is it a new thing where I'm more about the adventure and I don't know the group? So I try to be really flexible based on kind of what I see. Although some people, show their hand really early and you're like, oh, I know what makes your character sad, right? Darcy, you should talk about GMing too, because you GM a lot.
Yeah.
I do, but I have run very, very few campaigns. So I've mostly run one-shots, which I think brings me from a very weird perspective. And actually, James Fitzpatrick in the comments was just asking about a little bit about GM intrusions. And I'm not sure if let's see. So with respect to planning and intrusions, right, what I usually do is I run a bunch of demos for people I've never met before. And so the planning tends to be, okay, here are things that are going to happen. The characters will react in interesting ways. And at some point, like Charles's Excel spreadsheet, it gets fuzzy at the end, right? A lot of times, I just plan the beginning and we see where that goes. But GM intrusions are a big way that I think perhaps I learned to GM through the Cypher system. So GM intrusions are a big part of empowering me to say, oh, despite the fact that this is what I have for the planned adventure, I can see that player is really hooked on this NPC and are emotionally attached to it, so I'm going to mess with that. And so the GM intrusion comes out and it really pulls the narrative in some direction that none of us could have predicted. And so I think a lot of times, especially once I've run the same scenario over and over again, I'm just, I have that little prepared opening and I just GM intrude our way into a whole new game space. So that's kind of how I like to do it. But I need to learn how to write campaigns, so.
Yeah. I would also argue that the GM intrusion, though, can also help from almost the exact opposite way, because it does allow you as a GM to do some railroady things, but the players are complicit with it. So in my experience, in all of my gaming, right, I've had players turn down a GM intrusion twice. So it's pretty reliable that they will, people like the hooks, right? So when you say, if you're running a game without GM intrusion, you say, okay, now suddenly this bad thing happens. Sorry, guys, what are you going to do? Players are unhappy about that. But when you say, here's 2 XP and a bad thing happens, players are like, ooh, what's going to happen next? And so it does allow you in some ways, I hesitate to use railroady because that's a sort of a bad word, but it does let you plan for things to happen that it would be hard to do it in an equitable or fair way or a way that feels like everybody's contributing to the narrative without them.
That is such a good point.
I almost use them the opposite way. If I feel like the group is kind of stayed or stuck, I like to add a weird, okay, this is totally unexpected. You had no idea this was coming. Now what do you do? Kind of thing. So it's not always bad. It's just I don't know, you're throwing something in the midst of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and for con games especially, when you talk about kind of railroading or analysis paralysis is what GM intrusions just rush before them. It's beautiful. So the players are discussing something in the strange. They're agents. They're staking out a joint, and the GM intrusions come out. The police sirens are behind you. You have to keep going. There's more bad stuff right behind you. Keep going. Mm-hmm. We need to finish this game. We love GM intrusions over here. But I want to get back a little bit to, and it sounds like a lot of people are resonating with that, so that's great. So I guess I wanted to, explicitly address the crossover and the cross-pollination of gaming and writing for the both of you. Could you tell me anything about gaming that is maybe really helpful for your writing, or that you learned from gaming that has made you a better writer, and vice versa? Or, contrarily, things you thought would be easy because, just to take from gaming to writing and vice versa, but weren't? Just in case people who are writing here are interested in that. Why don't we start with Shanna?
So it's interesting because before or while I was also a fiction writer, I also was a nonfiction writer. I did a lot of, I've ghostwritten a couple of nonfiction books. I was a journalist for a while. And I actually take a lot of that from and use it in game writing. And by that, what I mean is, like, when I think about like explaining rule systems or helping someone understand the way in which the things that they need to know in order to run a game or play a game. I use a lot of my nonfiction elements in that, particularly like the how-to stuff. I wrote a lot of how-to stuff. And so that is actually really useful because I can put myself in the position of the person who needs the information and try to relay it in the most useful, succinct way. That's also true, weirdly, of like setting stuff as well. I really am a big fan of putting myself in the place of the player or the GM and saying, what do you need to know? What's cool? What's interesting? And then what are the little tidbits that you might latch onto and think are cool? So there's a lot of sort of empathy in that, and a lot of just really putting myself in the place of other people. For me, the big difference, sorry.
I was just going to say, RPG writing is absolutely expository writing. It really is. And sort of reading it through your reader's eyes is key. Yeah,
I think that's really true. For me, the difference between fiction and game writing is plot. Because in game writing, I don't have to supply the plot. The players do all of that, right? I'm just setting the scene for them to go do the cool and interesting things. And in fiction writing, I actually have to make the plot. And so I thought that game writing was going to be super easy because of that, but of course it isn't. It's a whole new beast. And so learning it I kind of walked in thinking I got this, and then, got knocked down a few pegs as I tried to figure it out. And so now I feel like I actually do have it, but it took a little bit longer than I might have expected.
All right, and Charles, do you have some thoughts about the cross-pollination, things that were hard and that are easy to transfer across?
I don't know that I would say much of this different from what Shanna said. Writing RPG stuff is very expository. It's very much about trying to be clear and concise and convey. And that doesn't have to be just facts or rules. It can also be mood and atmosphere and a lot of other things. But you're still looking for that clarity, your color needs to be really on point. In fiction, fiction allows you to get into a character's head. If you're writing a first-person character, it allows you to do a whole lot of other things that don't really exist in the RPG side. So, I don't know. They're different, right? They're different disciplines.
Yeah, that's a great point. Shanna, were you going to say something?
Just nodding.
Okay, cool. Some questions we have in the comments that I think are good and might especially relate to the both of you. When it comes to characters that you're writing from a game setting or from a game session and translating that into fiction, so Joshua was asking, do you make characters for Numenera fiction, thinking about them in terms of character sentences and really thinking about how closely tied to the rules do you really lean into or away from? And Charles, with your the Mason of New Orleans, how much did you lean into those characters, or did you make changes when you actually came to the page?
Right. Well, I haven't written for Numenera, so I'll let Shanna answer that part of the question, which I think is probably more relevant. But I think that, and I also wasn't writing for a specific game system. I derived a story out of a campaign that I ran. But I think that you have to be really, really careful about that sort of thing, because for either discipline, whether it's GMing and prepping for a game or writing for a game versus writing fiction, you really need to work to that medium and to the demands and needs of that medium and of that audience. But Shanna, has actually written full on, Numenera fiction. So you could talk about Talia and do you have in your mind, do you have a character description for her? Could you do a character sheet for her?
I could. I didn't start out with that. I never write fiction about characters that I've played at the table, because to me they're so different. But more, I am actually, when I write fiction, and this includes Numenera, I'm more interested in infusing the characters on the book with the sensibility of the game, as opposed to infusing them with the rules. I think you could probably break down every single character I've ever written into a sentence and figure it out. And you could take the equipment that I've written about and figure out, like, is this a cipher that exists, or, you know, what it would do. And that's great. Like, you can totally do that. But for me, it's about capturing the essence of the feel of the game, the feel of the narrative elements of the game in a story. And so I'm much more interested in that. I try not to break the rules, but, you know, Numenera just has so few rules, really, that it's kind of easy to, you can get away with anything, because, you know, you talk to the data sphere, or, you know, there's so many ways that you can make cool things happen that I don't really worry too much about. It isn't like some games where, you know, you have to be level 8 to have this skill, and,
Right.
and you know, you're reading the fiction and somebody's going to be like, that guy's level 5, he can't have that skill. You know, Numenera is just not like that. And so
Right.
it really gives
And
you
there's so many foci and descriptors that, and there's no sense that the foci, for example, that we've written and published are like the end all and be all, right? So if a character, you know, doesn't squarely fit into one of those, it's easy to imagine that there could be a focus that sort of deals with what the character is all about. But it's interesting that you said that you never write about characters that you've played, because that is someplace where we differ. I find that probably 9 out of 10 RPG characters that I play are not worthy of moving over to fiction, because they just don't have enough going on inside them. But a lot of times when I have a character that I'm playing in a game, particularly in a campaign game, and things get really interesting, and that character develops a very rich, like, inner life where there's a lot, like, there's certain things that I'm doing at the table that are actions, but there's more complex reasoning behind inside my head about why that character is motivated that way, what that character cares about, and so on. And I find that when those characters have that inner complexity that really can't find expression at the gaming table, I love to take those characters into fiction, where then I can put those parts of the character in front of the reader through, you know, if that character is a first-person character, a character where we can see inside that character's motivations a little bit.
I think that's really, I feel like I might be the only person that I talk to that I know of who doesn't like to do that crossover. And I don't know why I can't. Like, I feel like a lot of people do, and they do it really successfully, and they make these amazing characters from the table, or even vice versa. And I just don't, they're so different for me that I can't find that bridge between the two. I don't know why.
Interesting.
That's so interesting. Can I ask Shanna, especially with your Invisible Sun character, because I know you've been, you know, on the blog, we've had a little bit about them, and you've kept like a Pinterest board of influences for that character. And of course, with development mode, that's a way of, you know, one way of engaging with the character away from the table, which, like Charles is talking about, you might want to go write a novel to really explore those internal monologues. Do you feel, Shanna, like development mode is something totally separate from more novel writing? Does that feel like a different part of your brain when you're exploring something very personal to your character, but it still feels like more like game than it does like fiction? Or can you talk about how Invisible Sun is different, or is it still feel really different, separate for you?
It feels more like, it's a tricky space, but I think that, like, the game table is, I inhabit that character, right? Whether I'm at the game table or I'm writing about them, I'm really like, I am this character. I am this person, and how do I react and stuff. Whereas fiction, I'm like, who is this person and how does she or he react? And so it's a different, and there's a different craft, I find. There's a different craft between role-playing a character and writing a character. And so that I need different parts of my brain. I have a different craft aesthetic. I want them to do different things. And so role-playing, I am that character, and writing fiction, I am telling that character's story, and they're not the same for me. I don't know why.
That's very fair. Oh, that's super interesting.
I know, now I want to try it just to see.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that. I think it might be interesting to leave on a note of, you know, we've been getting even more really, really great narratives coming in, especially tonight. I think after people had the most recent call to the Valley of Sins. Yeah, I'm very, very, very pleased and thrilled to see what we've been seeing. And there's art, and there's you know, nice character pieces, and world building and plot. It's really great. Do either of you have any advice for people who are writing in Numenera? Do you think there's something, you know, a nugget of advice you could give that might make it easier for them to write stories in the ninth world. And why don't we start with Charles, if he's thought of one?
So advice for writing in the ninth world. I would, boy, first and foremost, no, I'm going to pass. Pass. Oh, come back to me.
Yeah. I didn't warn them about this one, so.
I guess that's me then. I would say go weird but ground. So like use concrete examples of the weirdness so that people aren't feeling super lost. But you know, more than any other like setting that we write or game that we play, I feel like Numenera just is an open book where you can kind of go anywhere and do anything. And so I feel like go anywhere and do anything. Like just follow your heart and have like have this character do all this amazing stuff that you can't do in some other settings. And I think, you know, one of the things I love about Numenera is that there's this sense of camaraderie, right? Even though everything's really isolated, people are working together. And so like hearing these stories where people are now starting to cross, like they're using each other's characters and they're combining stories. And really cool. I just think that's so fantastic. Like what a whole new way to role play is to sort of make these fictions together. And I don't know, I'm just really loving it. That's not really advice, that's more gushing, but.
Yeah. And Shanna said it better. What I was struggling with is embracing the weirdness of the ninth world, but also like be original, right? Don't drag another inspiration. I mean, boy, Numenera is filled with inspirations, you know, from Nausicaa to Mobius to all kinds of things, but find ways to make it like completely, you know, its own thing, right? And love the weirdness of this world.
I love that.
Love the weirdness. I like that.
Thank you so much. I think we're gonna call it here, but thank you so much, everyone who paid attention in the chat and
thank
was
you for the nice things and the questions and.
Yeah, and thank you for all the creations you all are making. It's making our days.
It is really overwhelming. I will be honest. I'm running the Kickstarter on the day-to-day basis, and I can't keep up with all the stuff that's in the comments because there's so much of it, and it is so good.
I know.
It's pretty incredible. Yeah. Thank you to everybody for really pouring it into that.
It's very rewarding to see everybody jump on board like that.
Absolutely.
All right, we're gonna call it. Have a good night, everybody, and see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.